We're in the U.S. and English is the predominant language. Therefore, it's inevitable that when the children go to school, that English becomes their predominant language.
There's this natural cycle in which is often difficult for first-generation speakers to completely learn the language fluently. Second-generation speakers are often bilingual, and by the time they're third-generation speakers, the new language, English, would be the dominant language, and then it becomes a struggle to keep this important heritage alive by maintaining Spanish.
I have 2 Hispanic students, and they speak very English and Spanish. It's really funny, but they're there because they had to take it for college, and they do their work, but I can tell their English is better than their Spanish. And they make mistakes, and when they come to the board, the other kids say, "You're supposed to know this," and I explain to them, no, because all they do is hear Spanish from their parents.
This semester, I'm teaching what we call a writing intensive class. And I've seen the roster already, and I know that I have some students of Spanish heritage, and I can see the same problems that I see with my sons with them.
The other students can realize that just because they are Hispanics, it doesn't mean that they can read, write, and speak it.
One of the things that happens is that you have children who speak Spanish up until the time they're 6. They grow up in their home when they're very young, speaking Spanish with their parents. They get to the school system, they feel a lot of pressure to speak English, they learn English, and then they start to feel pressure to speak only English. So maybe around the time they're in 3rd grade or so, they start refusing to speak Spanish at home, and then they actually lose it. So you end up with someone who's 21 or 22 who once was a completely fluent speaker of Spanish and now doesn't know enough Spanish to order Mexican food at a restaurant, for example. And I think it's very sad. That's a resource that these children had and they lost. It's like if you had a 6-year-old who knew how to play chess and then you made them forget it.
I lost a good part of my Spanish ability growing up. I would see Spanish, speaking Spanish as a bad thing because of the early conditioning that I had in my school system. But when I went to college and at Texas A&M University and I was starting to compete for jobs, I saw language as an asset.
I had to completely forget about my Spanish background to focus mainly on my to learn English, because I remember when I was in California, one of my ESL teachers told me that in order for me to learn English, I had to sleep, eat, drink, everything had to be English, and and that was my main goal.
I think we know a lot more about bilingualism and about the bilingual mind now than we did a generation or 2 ago. I think teachers are less likely today to oppose our bilingual students' bilingual maintenance. And, but still, we have a long, long way to go.
We do tell the parents not to worry, to keep using their Spanish at home, because they need both languages. And I think I have taken advantage of having both languages and knowing both of them. So I tell the parents, listen, your son is going to be able to speak English and speak Spanish, and you have to have a communication in one language. And if they don't speak English, they need to keep speaking in Spanish, not to be ashamed of speaking Spanish, but to keep communicating with them.
It's the minority that are forcing their children to speak Spanish. They are speaking Spanish to them, but whenever the kids kind of like look the other way, they don't force it. And I didn't force it on my kids either. I didn't force it on them. And one time they told me, they said, Mom, that was bad that you didn't.
I think people underestimate the amount of work it takes for a parent, whether it's both, because we actually know parents, the kids that have both parents that are, their native language is Spanish, but it's still, maybe because they're in an English-speaking world, it's very difficult to raise that child as a Spanish-speaking child.
I guess it would be hard sometimes when you're at the grocery store and you're young and you don't want to speak Spanish to your parents because you might think somebody will be thinking you're weird. But after a while, you gotta understand what's important and what you have to do, what you're used to.
I have a daughter. She's 6 years old now, and when we do speak English sometimes because she's kind of confused which one's Spanish with what's in English. But she know how to speak in English. She know how to speak in Spanish, and even she know how to write and read in Spanish already. But I told her that we have to speak always Spanish at home because I don't want her to forget that. And I mean, of course, she will know English.
The normal thing is that Spanish dies out, and that's what we find in Los Angeles, that's what we find in New York with Puerto Rican American speakers. The interesting thing is that these new communities that are growing up in the South and in North Carolina and in other places are going to have a chance to do things differently if they want to. So the kids that are born there now are going to be growing up in a time where we have more value for other languages, where we have a little bit more appreciation of diversity. So there's a chance that this pattern may be different for them, that they might have a chance of retaining Spanish if they work at it. But the expected pattern would be that after a certain time, people do lose Spanish in the community.
I think it's very nice to know two languages because you got more opportunities, and plus it's just something good for you not to forget where you're coming from. And if white people that or Americans want to learn Spanish and we have the opportunity to know it from home, not to do it.
I'd encourage Latino parents to encourage their children to learn English and become proficient in English, but at the same time, and show them the importance of valuing the language of the culture, which is Spanish, and making that a part of their lives as well.